And today we're here with Representative Tammy Nichols from Middleton. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, I'm all
Yeah,
right.
good.
Tell me, catch us up a little bit with what's going on at the Capitol. Today, the tax cut bill passed the Senate,
Hmm.
and if I remember correctly, you at the time it was as you're on the Revenue Tax Committee,
Correct.
you said that you were going to vote in favor of it getting out of committee, but you reserved the right to change your vote on the floor. And I think ultimately you sided with the legislation. You voted for it.
Mhm.
Tell me why you had some reservations about that.
Yeah, well, I have reservations because, we keep getting these supposed tax cut bills, and while in essence they are a tax cut, I compare them to breadcrumbs because we have all this money in the state right now, $2 billion surplus just about. And I would assume, or I would hope that we could bring out really good pieces of legislation that give really good tax cuts to Idahoans and not just a rebate or just a temporary tax cut. And we know by talking to our constituents that property tax is a big deal, grocery tax is a big deal. And those are the two big ones that they want someone to do something about. And so I spoke in favor of bringing this bill out of the committee, but I wanted to reserve my right because I'm wanting to see other pieces of legislation, and there are other pieces of legislation out there that would give even more of a tax break to Idahoans. But unfortunately, we can't get them into the committee.
Why not?
You know, there's several issues with that. I would say probably the top few are first, it's the person that's bringing the legislation. I think there's some bias in that, that the chairman probably has some bias in that, either because they don't like the person or it's not their piece of legislation. And so I think that's part of the issue. I think that there's already uh, puzzle pieces in play, that there's certain pieces of legislation that either the governor wants to have done or leadership wants to have done, and so these other pieces of legislation that could bring tax cuts are not included in that package. And so I'd say those are probably the top two, actually.
So today, well, let me back up a second. I find it really interesting, and of course, people don't understand this because the Republican-controlled legislature, 85% Republican,
Mhm.
is excited about lowering the income tax from 6.5 to 6. And
Right.
okay, I'll grant you that's
It's a
not
cut.
nothing, right?
Right.
But it's stunning to me that if you actually go back in history, in 1931, I mentioned this the other day when I was interviewing Jim Mattis. In 1931, when the Democrats controlled the state legislature
Hmm.
and first put in place the income tax, do you know what the top rate was?
I don't know what the top rate was. Probably just a few.
4%.
Okay.
And actually, the top rate 4% kicked in, I think, at like $20,000,
Oh, okay.
which in today's money is something in the neighborhood of $350,000.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not as if most Idahoans are paying that top rate. What they were mostly paying was 1%.
Hmm.
Now, that bill, when it was passed, was called the Property Tax Reduction Act.
Mm.
Didn't really reduce property
Right.
taxes, I guess. We still have property taxes. Now we have income taxes. And on top of that, in 65, we added sales tax.
Yep.
What is wrong with this Republican legislature that this is the best we can do?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and that's one that I'm still trying to even figure out because, like I said, we have this surplus in the state. We have all sorts of taxes that we're paying, and unfortunately, I think a lot of it has to do with you have these unelected bureaucrats. You have we have so many agencies now. We're so dependent on the federal government, and I think that giving people back their tax dollars has we're a spend mentality. We just want to spend all the money, and every agency wants more money. There's never enough money for everybody, and unfortunately, taxpayers are kind of left at the bottom of the barrel. They're not. They're kind of put on the back burner on giving them their tax money back.
So if you could wave a magic wand, let's say you were queen for the day,
Mhm.
what would you do?
As far as taxes go,
Yeah.
I would definitely get rid of the grocery tax. We're one of 5 states left that actually tax food, and every state around us has some sort of either they don't charge tax on food, or they have certain foods that they don't charge tax on. But I think that is one that really needs to just go away. I would like to see. I actually submitted a personal bill on the sales tax to take the sales tax rate back down to 5%, which when they increased it to 6%, we were promised it was just
I
temporary,
remember that.
right? And here we are, 2022, and we're still paying 6%. So I would like to drop it back down to 5%. Representative Ron Nate and I submitted a gas tax bill, which we would actually half the gas tax. So it'd go down to 16 cents instead of 32. And it would be for 2 years to try to just get us through this Biden administration's term. Hopefully there's not another one. But, so there's another one. There's so many that we could actually, even if we dropped them just a little bit, even with the income tax, if we dropped them just a little bit, it would help people all around in general. And yet the income tax is the one, for whatever reason, became the chosen tax cut bill. And it's not even really a tax cut. I mean, it doesn't really help the middle class that much. And the middle class is the ones that really do need the help. I mean, a $75 rebate, that's like a tank of gas now. I mean, there's so many other things that we could do to really help Idahoans.
Has the committee conveyed any sense of frustration that, even privately, that this process is really constrained down to just a handful of bills, and it's not a very open process where people are, you're on the committee, you're the tax experts on the committee, come one, come all. I remember previous iterations of the state having surpluses going back to 2000, 20 years ago.
Sure.
And I keep telling people that, legislators brought, a dozen bills. There was eliminating tax on groceries. There was, the grocery tax credit, doing something with property taxes, sales taxes, and there's just a lot of different things.
Right.
And this time you get one bill. Is there anybody that's sitting besides you on the committee who's going, hey, wait a minute, maybe we can do something a little different?
Yeah. I have talked to some of the other members on the tax committee. Not a lot of them have come to me, speaking of frustrations or saying, hey, why don't we do this? I think there's several people that understand that the process is broken, that the way that it's supposed to work, and where we're supposed to be this epitome of bringing out ideas and representing different parts of the state, and bringing those ideas together, and at least giving introductions. I would say the Democrats are very much on board with getting rid of the grocery tax, and so they would like to see that happen. We all know that property tax needs some reform. We were promised last year an amazing property tax reduction or repeal or something, and instead we get this 24-page bill at the last minute, the last hour, and no time to read it. It's rammed through everything in less than 24 hours, passed off the floor. And now we see that there was unintended consequences that are happening now because of that, with the circuit breakers and different things. Granted, maybe Idahoans didn't see as large of a property tax increase, but over the last several years, their property taxes have been going up and up and up regardless. So, so we're told these things, and then there's little that come to fruition, unfortunately. And my frustration is that we keep telling our constituents, oh yeah, we're going to take care of this. We're going to reduce taxes. We're going to do this. And this is an election year, mind you. And yet we continue to fail and bring these horrible bills. I mean, they really are breadcrumbs and Band-Aids. That's been my new term that I've been using in Rev and Taxes. We're giving breadcrumbs and Band-Aids, and that's all we're doing.
I guess you had one of those again today, but the Senator Vick's proposal to increase the grocery tax credit, I suppose you voted to introduce that. What do you do when that bill comes back?
And yeah, but my thought though is, why do we continue to kick this can down the road? Why don't we just get rid of it? I mean, it costs the state money to process those rebates, right?
Yep.
And people have to submit it, and we can continue to increase these rebates, but we have all this inflation going on. Food prices have gone crazy through the roof. I mean, anyone can go to the grocery store and see that the prices have gone up tremendously. And so why do we continue to tax? We don't need it. We have the Wayfair account, which is the online sales tax, and that is supposed to offset taxes. why aren't we using some of these things that we have to really actually get rid of taxes?
Has Governor Little, in 2017, when he was running for governor, when he was lieutenant governor, said that he wanted to get rid of the tax on groceries. So I presume that he and his staff have been to your office and have been all over the House and all over the Senate
Oh,
working
multiple
to get rid of
times.
the tax on groceries. What's going on with that?
I have to say, after last year's session, I had people come and ask me, so do you talk to the governor? Do you see the governor? And I'm like, no, we never see the governor. I've had one meeting with the governor since I've been in office, and that was my first term during the very first week of our session, where freshmen were invited into his office to come and talk to him. And that has really been my main interaction with the governor.
Are your other colleagues, are they invited down? Is it a function of you being a conservative, or is it
It
that
seems very selective, unfortunately. Most of my very conservative colleagues are in the same boat as I am. There's some that end up getting a meeting if they're lucky enough to go talk to him, but it seems very selective, unfortunately. And and I think, I don't know what his thought process and all of this, but I would really like to see some better communication in that regard.
So let me go back to the grocery tax credit, since you will be voting on that actually soon, I would imagine. Um, the proposal that Senator Vick has, I mean, isn't terrible, I guess, but it's,
Right.
and I'm kind of wondering what's so magical about, I'm 64 years old and my grocery tax credit is what, $120. And then I turn 65, and does my food consumption go up or something? Is that how that works? Or is that just pandering to seniors in a political sense,
You
and
know,
buying off votes?
again, I think sometimes we have this legislation that comes, again, Representative Ron Nate, he has to repeal it. It wouldn't even actually get rid of the rebate. It would just repeal the tax on groceries. Right. And so sometimes I feel that, again, that chairman or leadership don't, if certain people propose bills, even if they're great ideas, they're not going to entertain them because they don't like the person. And then, so instead you'll end up with these subpar bills that will come in just to appease them enough that, okay, we did something on this, and we can, stick a feather in our hat because we did something. And I just don't think that's fair to Idahoans. I don't think that's fair to taxpayers. I don't think that's true representation, nor is it pure representation. And I think we can do a much better job. And if we're conservative and we tout ourselves as conservatives, and especially fiscal conservatives, then we should be taking fiscal conservative action.
Is the legislature some kind of liberal oligarchy?
When I travel around and people ask me where I'm from, and I tell them Idaho, and then they'll ask me, "Oh, you're in a really conservative state," and I tell them, "You know what? We have really conservative people. We do have conservative legislators, but our government is not conservative.
Yeah.
It is really not."
I've had the same conversations with people all over the country. They hear Idaho, and they go, "Okay, you're 85% Republican legislature. You must
Yeah.
have all these very conservative policies," but
Right.
actually, no.
No, and what's surprising is people that are moving to our state, because Idaho is a very fast-growing state. We have people coming from all over, and they come here with this ideology that we are very conservative, that, we run our state, true red, and then they get here and they start finding out that that's really not the case. And that's been kind of interesting to watch, because then they're like, oh no, we're not going to let this happen to the state, the state that we just came from. We don't want the same thing to happen. So then they start getting involved and they start taking action, because they see that it's not as conservative, it's not as red as what they were hoping.
Let me run some of the tax policy stuff to ground just a little bit.
Okay.
So, are you thinking that we'll leave this legislative session doing anything at all meaningful on property taxes?
So I hear rumors that there is a senator that is putting together a property tax bill. Now, what that looks like, I have not seen yet. For me personally, because of the last few years of hearing that we're going to reform property tax and nothing really has come about that, I don't have high hopes, unfortunately. Now, granted, property tax has to be done, it's multi-level.
Sure.
And so it's not just going to be a state issue thing. There also needs to be changes on the county level and city level as well. So, but I just really don't have high expectations, unfortunately, that we're going to do that.
Why is that?
It's because of past actions, the things that I've seen. I mean, if I have seen magic work in the legislature, I have seen bills almost come out of a hat, so to speak. It's like magic, and they can get something done in less than 24 hours to the governor's desk, and be done. And so I think if we were really wanting to bring true tax reform and true tax reduction, we would be seeing it happening. They should have, from the very get-go, there should have already been stuff ready to go, and start having that dialogue, that discussion.
But something has to be stopping that. And I'm not trying, I really try hard not to put words in anyone's mouth. But it seems as if it's the special interest groups. You pay taxes. Some of those taxes make their way to your school board.
Sure.
And some of those taxes make their way to the School Boards Association. And the same thing is true with the cities. You pay taxes, the city turns around and sends that money to the Cities Association of Idaho Cities.
Yeah.
You pay taxes to the county turns around and sends the money to the Idaho Association of Counties. They all send lobbyists to the Capitol. Is that what the hitch is in the get along? That it's these special interest groups that are doing their level best to leave things the way they are? Or is there some other force at work here?
I would say that is probably part of a factor because, like I said, going back, there's never enough money for these agencies and bureaucrats and things. There's never enough money. Everybody's always wanting more money. I mean, we just look at spending right now on education. And, everybody wants a piece of the pie, and we need to add more money to literacy, and we need to add more money. I mean, there's never enough money. And so everybody is trying to, right now they're bringing forth budgets, and these different agencies are bringing their budgets forward. And there's the recommendation from the governor on what those budgets should be. And then there's the agency's recommendation on what they think their budget should be. And I was just in one of my committees in agriculture, and we got a rundown of all the different categories in agriculture and what those budgets are. They're not even spending all that money. Some of them have over half their budget still left, but yet everybody wants more money. So there's never enough. And the taxpayers are the ones that get to foot the bill. Although granted, we're taking a lot of money from the feds now too, but it's still taxpayer money. So.
Well, I mean, they print it.
Right. Yeah. It's like magic money.
So yeah, it truly is. So let's talk about that a little bit, because there was a bill that also passed the House. I'm pretty sure you voted against it. That was the bill that would take $75 million initially, put it into an account so that school employees can be on the state insurance plan.
Right.
And what were your objections to that?
Yeah. So my objection to that wasn't necessarily to put employees on the state plan. Okay. That's well and good enough, right? Okay. Sure. Do that. But for me, it was putting the cart before the horse. For one, there's no guarantee that the money to be spent on the insurance plan has to go to the insurance plan. For two, we were picking a company, pretty much monopolizing it as them being the chosen company. Yeah, Blue Cross. And they get to be the chosen company to benefit from all these, not only teachers, but all their other staff, all the professionals. I mean, all those people. Yeah, anybody. Yeah. The amounts that were on the bill were not truthful amounts. So there was some discretion in what was actually going to be being spent. And granted, it's supposed to save us money, but I saw estimates for 10 years projection that it could all cost us billions of dollars. And what's that going to do? That's, if we end up in that's going to increase property taxes. That's going to increase all sorts of taxes. And I'm feeling it for our seniors. Here's our senior citizens that have been contacting us over the last couple of years saying, I can't afford my home anymore. My property tax has gone up. I'm on a limited budget. And now we're going to possibly, ask them for more money now and tax them out of their homes. So it's not that I had an issue with the teachers and everybody being on the plan. It's just the way that they're trying to implement it.
Is there something to be said for, and I asked some other people this as well, there's something to be said for the fact that you're the taxpayer. but you can't afford the plan that you're paying for state and local employees to be on. And in fact, there are school districts in Idaho, there are cities and counties in
Yeah.
Idaho where the taxpayer pays 100% of the premium.
Right.
And the deductible, where my deductible is I think $5,000.
Yeah.
Yours, any government employee is 250, 500. I don't know
Mhm.
what the figure is, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a deal if you can get it.
Right.
So
Right.
is there something to be said for we're telling taxpayers to pay for a plan that they can't afford, that they certainly are not even the market for themselves?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, since Obamacare came into play and what that's actually done to the insurance cost and the market itself, I've talked to so many people, and I remember myself when you could get a plan for, $50 a month or whatever the case was, and it might not have been like the best plan there was, but it was decent. And good luck trying to find that now. And that kind of goes back. I've never seen government take over anything and make it better or more affordable. So for us to be able to say, "Oh yeah, this is going to be the best way to do it," I don't put a lot of hope into that either, because I haven't seen government do a better job than what a private market can do, or whatever the case may be. Now, again, sure, stick it on there, but at least let's be honest in this conversation. And it reminds me a lot of what happened with Medicaid expansion and how we were promised all these great things with what was going to happen if we would just pass Medicaid expansion, and we were going to save all this money. And then, just a few years later, we find out it's costing us way more than what we thought.
Right.
There's way more people that are on it. And I just kind of see that repeating in this case as well.
Do you think there's been some talk about this, how this bill was really rushed through? And I had Greg Cheney in here the other day, and we talked a little bit about the fact that the bill was oddly rooted to his committee, the
Uh-huh.
Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
He chalks it up to being that it wasn't in Title 33, the education code. But I'd point out that as soon as the bill got over to the Senate,
Went to
it went to
education.
education.
Yeah.
Having said all that, there seemed to be a lot of rush. And even when Sally Toon, who's not exactly a conservative, liberal Democrat from wherever she's from, Gooding or wherever,
Hmm.
gets up there and says, "This is great. We did this 50 years ago and we stopped doing it."
Yeah.
And no one's asked, but why?
Right.
Why did we stop doing that? Isn't
Right.
that something that somebody might ought to want to know? I don't know the answer. But in
Yeah.
1972, something happened that compelled the state of Idaho to shift positions and take the school employee off of the state insurance. And now we're doing it again, and no one's even asking the question. It's just
Yeah.
the question that I have is, okay, between that and the fact that the governor's former legal counsel is now working for Blue Cross,
Hmm.
the fact that former governor Butch Otter is a spokesperson for
Blue Cross.
Blue
Yeah.
Cross, is there something here that's outside the policy realm that maybe it's, inside deal making?
There does. I mean, it
It
does
just, I
leave one
mean,
to wonder, doesn't it? There's a lot of
are
coincidental
you
things going
suspicious
on.
about that? Are there others who are suspicious?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there are. And, and we're seeing the same thing. I mean, why an education issue would be going through a committee that's not education is by itself just strange.
It looked to me like that was because the House Education Committee has been somewhat conservative.
Hmm.
They lost a pretty conservative member, and that conservative member has been replaced with apparently a liberal. But there still might be the votes on the committee to potentially ask tough questions and kill the
Yeah.
legislation. Is that the reason why it went to that committee? That's safer than, say, even the House State Affairs Committee,
Yeah.
which is also particularly
I would say
conservative.
yes, that is a really probably plausible reason on why it went to the committee that it did, because I think it probably would have had a harder time getting out of that committee because they would have asked questions. There's good legislators on there that do ask tough questions, and I think there would have been some things brought up that maybe they didn't want brought up. So they sent it to a committee that would be friendly to passing it out of the committee.
That's what it looks like to me too.
Yeah,
Let's talk about education a little bit.
sure.
I know you're not on the committees, but you have done a lot of work in this area. You're going to see a lot of proposals soon to deal with early childhood education. Most of it, I suppose, will come through the budget. The governor's got a proposal to throw a bunch of money into
Literacy.
literacy, gives it to the school districts, and they get to decide what to do with the money. But ultimately, the purpose of it is to expand full day
Right.
kindergarten. What will you be doing on that?
I don't agree with that. And there was actually just a report that came out not too long ago saying that, full day kindergarten is not in the best interest of the child. And I think that we really need to turn our discussion and our desire to school choice. That is what I'm hearing from constituents all over the state. That they want school choice with all the things that have happened in education in the last few years, with schools being shut down and mandates and all these different things coming into play. Critical race theory, all the stuff that they say doesn't happen in Idaho.
Right.
I have worked with a lot of parents all over the state over the last couple of years, and they're waking up to let's have school choice. We want the option on where and how our children are educated, and education should not be a one size fits all approach. Children are individuals and they learn differently and they do better in some environments versus others. And so, that's where we should really be turning our attention. We've thrown money at literacy over the last many years. I mean, tons of money, and our literacy rates have not improved. We're actually not doing any better than what we were a few years ago. So I'm not seeing where the money that we're spending is giving us a better outcome. And I think that what we could be doing is offering school choice. And I think that will actually give us a better outcome.
So again, I ask you, why is that so hard? Maybe we'll get a bill passed this year, maybe we won't.
Yeah.
But I've been watching this for 25 years, and it's the same outcome. And if you go back, there was a legislator, you probably met him, from Canyon County named Morris Clements.
Mm-hmm.
And Morris brought legislation in the 1970s for a voucher.
Yeah.
And the Republican legislature refused to hear his bill. And out of frustration, Morris simply resigned from the legislature.
Yeah.
That was in the class of Butch Otters. This has been going on forever. I
It
remember,
has.
I remember a bill in 2000. I remember legislation in 2010, 2015, and now here we are, 2022. There are other states that have more education choice. What is the
Absolutely.
problem here in Idaho?
Absolutely. I would say for us, for education, it is the unions and the drive that they have and the control that they have over.
Why?
That's a good question, because again, we're supposed to be this conservative state, right? And we have states that are not near as conservative as what we're supposed to be, and they're passing school choice. They're giving parents the options on how to educate their children. They're doing the voucher programs. They're doing the student savings accounts. They're giving those options, and they're seeing them work. They're seeing good outcomes because of it. And so, but why we have that problem here is it's beyond me, and I don't understand why we can't even just have that discussion and get that discussion going. Because if we're representing our constituents, and I know I'm not the only legislator that's hearing this, but that is what people want. That's what parents want, is they want options. They want school choice.
The Idahoans for, what is it called? Idaho Business and Education,
Mm-hmm.
Rod Grammer's group, is arguing that talking about education choice is anti-rural school. Well, you're a rural legislator. What do you make of that argument?
I don't buy that argument. I think that there's a very narrow view on what school choice looks like to some people. And I think they see it as either it's public school or private school or charter school, and that's your only options. There are so many options now for education. And so to say that, rural schools are not going to benefit from school choice is not the case. You have, and we've seen it happen. We have parents that have already taken matters into their own hands, whether they get the money for it or not for their child, but they're doing other things. They're doing co-ops. They're doing, back to one room schoolhouse type scenarios, online learning, charter schools. There's all sorts of options. And my area is rural, and there's lots of kids in my area that participate in several of those options. So it doesn't just have to be public school or charter school or private school. There's many other options available. And for the rural areas, they find stuff. They find a way that works for them. And if you're really, really rural, there's options still available. And so it's not so simple that rural areas are not going to benefit from it, because we can find a way. We'll find a way to benefit from it.
I've been talking a little bit in my office about school performance. And that's something that kind of doesn't seem to get a lot of attention. Like I was pointing out, for example, that in the Weiser School District, 1 in 10 school students will actually be able to pass the college entrance exam.
Yeah.
In Fruitland, I think it's 25%. Boise, about 50%. Are any of your colleagues talking about why that is? We keep shoveling money into the education system, and this is the result that we get.
Yeah, there are groups of us that do talk about that, and we do realize we already know that just because you throw money at things does not improve outcomes, and that's no different for education. Again, going back to school choice, though, several of us see it that if you offer school choice, it creates competition and it creates schools to do better and to try to raise that bar instead of just going with the status quo and not making any changes. But Idaho has a weird mentality with education, and it's almost like if you're not for giving more money, then you hate kids, you hate teachers, you hate you hate education in general. You want to defund public school. I mean, I've heard that from people myself when I'm just talking about giving the option of school choice, and I just think that's a really weird mentality to have because it's not true. It's not true. We see studies all over the place showing that school choice is a good option, showing that it improves education, shows that it gives more options to students, and that the outcomes are better. And so, why would we not want to improve education? Why would we not? Why would we want to stay with the status quo? And we know that throwing more money at it is not changing the scenario any. In fact, we're getting worse. And so, why would we not want to do something that would actually benefit and better our education system?
Have conditions changed any in the discussion regarding education now that it's become quite apparent that our schools are teaching critical race theory, or I should say they're engaged in critical race theory, social justice, social emotional learning? Has the temperature changed in the Capitol relative to how your colleagues view the public education system?
I think what we have is we still have those that, they're just diehard. They're going to support public education regardless of what it's actually doing. There's some that really have a hard time. It's almost like a paradigm shift that they have to make where, okay, yeah, public education isn't doing what we're hoping that it would do. Or they are stuck back, when their kids many years ago were in public education and how it was then, but they haven't had kids in school for, 10, 15, 20 years. I still have kids in school. I still see what's going on in the education system.
Your son's a senior now, is that right?
I have a sophomore and a junior.
Okay.
Yeah. And then one at college. So I see what's happening in those environments. And, you have the ones that'll just say, oh, that's never going to happen in Idaho. That's not being taught here. We have a trusting mentality. We want to trust people that are educating our kids, and we have a lot of great teachers. We have a lot of great principals. It's not everybody, but we can't be so blinded and say that this isn't happening when we see it happening everywhere. It's happening everywhere. Idaho's not in a bubble. We can't keep everything out from our state. It is being brought in here. We've seen lots of evidence that there is critical race theory of sorts being taught, that there is Marxism of sorts being taught, that there is social justice being taught. I mean, we've seen it play out into our education system. And so we can't deny that. And to do so is completely the wrong way to approach education, and we should want to stop that stuff before it gets here. But instead, it seems like a lot of people want to take an approach where it's after the fact, and then we have to deal with it. It should be the opposite. We should want to deal with it now so that we don't have to deal with it even harder down the road.
It's happening. We've documented. We have a new report coming out. Actually, I think it's online now. Is that right? You have a new report that's online. It talks about critical social justice in Idaho schools, and the stories in there are horrific. The girl from Coeur d'Alene who was, convinced that she was a boy, and her parents were not informed. Coeur d'Alene. Not exactly a liberal haven.
No.
I mean, it's a North Idaho, very conservative country, and parents weren't informed about it. We have culturally responsive teaching that's in the education rules. You've got
Mhm.
vendors that are working with school districts to bring in,
Absolutely.
diversity and inclusion and all this other nonsense, and it's here.
It is, and our teachers that are going through our education system here, our colleges and stuff, it's being taught there, and that's how they're supposed to be teaching. And so to try to ignore it and say it's not happening that's rose-colored glasses living in an alternate reality, because it is. And so we need to approach it as if we know it is going on, because it is going on.
So last legislative session, the legislature finally, never seen it happen before, but the legislature finally at least took some ownership over the college and university system and said, you guys have got to eliminate $2.5 million. Not a lot of money, by the way. It's like a rounding error.
Yeah.
But Boise State, University of Idaho, and Idaho State University, you need to go and get rid of these social justice programs, $2.5 million worth. And they didn't do anything. They did
Right.
nothing. Nothing's changed.
Right.
What are you guys going to do about that?
I mean, it's gonna. I said this many years ago. I did an interview with Breitbart, and they asked me a similar question. How do we change this? And I said it has to be. It's the money. The money talks. So you have to take the money away. If they're not going to listen to you, then take the money away. I'm working on something right now in regards to the National School Board Association and what happened with them coming out wanting to label parents as terrorists because they were concerned about what was happening in their kids' education. So they were showing up at the school board meetings and vetting and their frustrations with what was transpiring. And here, there's already been 19 states that have pulled out their membership from the National School
Not
Board
ours.
Association, and we're not one of them. No, we're not one of them.
What are you doing about that?
So I'm working with a few other legislators, writing a resolution right now. So, yeah.
I mean, one of the difficult things about that, again, is to follow the money.
Mhm.
You pay your taxes to your school district. You think it's being used to educate your kids, but
Right.
actually it's being used to pay dues to the Idaho School Board Association, and they spend money with the National School Board. So Idaho
Right.
money is going to the national organization to promote this stuff.
Exactly. And I think there's a disconnect in that. People think that when we talk about spending money on education, that all that money is going into the classroom.
Right.
Little of that money actually goes into the classroom. It goes to all sorts of other things. And that's one of them. Is we pay these membership dues to many, many different organizations, education organizations, including the National School Board Association. And they're the ones that are helping to bring in this indoctrination, the critical race theory, the social justice, all that sort of stuff. So we're paying to allow that to happen, and that's wrong. That's not how tax money should go. And if we really want to get that money to the students, school choice is the best option.
So knowing, and I appreciate that. So, but knowing that you've got money going into the school system, college and K through 12,
Mhm.
that's being used in ways that we would find abhorrent, the hypersexualization of children in the K through 12 education
Yeah.
system. You would think that there would be the votes to stop that.
You would think.
And how confident are you that there is?
Well, again, I think it goes back to they're not dealing with reality. They're not dealing, they have this idea that, everybody, because that's what I heard last time when we were talking about the budget. And there was a grant that was up on
The
the floor.
pre-kindergarten grant.
Right.
Mhm.
And how, that money was just going to go to help young kids, help preschoolers and little kids, and then information started coming out on the materials that were being promoted through that organization, that it was, these books for toddlers on A is for activist and
T is for trans.
Yeah, I mean, just crazy stuff. And then you would hear other legislators say, well, that's not going to happen in my area, or we're not doing
Right.
that in my area. So I think there's this disconnect that somehow their area is protected and this stuff is never going to happen or encroach into their area, and that everybody that's working with kids, that is working in education or doing these programs, have the best interest
Right.
of the child and the best intent. And yes, we want to believe that, but we can see around us that that's not the case. That's not really what's transpiring.
I'm kind of stupefied by this. Jim Addis was here the other day, and he said the same thing. Well, I talked to the folks in my community, and they tell me they've got this wonderful pre-kindergarten
Yeah.
program, and
Mhm.
maybe they're doing this elsewhere, but they're not doing it here.
Right.
A, I think they are doing it there, and he just doesn't know it. And B, are we really okay with accepting a grant that in Twin Falls is going to be used to indoctrinate kids?
We shouldn't
Even
be.
even if it's not my district, it's good
No.
for me, but not good for them. But that's okay because
Right. No, we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be supporting, because unfortunately the money is going to trickle to
there's no
that national
question.
organization, or that organization that is promoting that is trying to push that into our schools. I mean, we have the National School Board Association, and they're the ones that wanted to defund the police and keep the schools shut down, and all this other stuff. So the money is going to trickle to them regardless of if we want it to or not. It's going to get to them eventually, because just like in the legislature and how we pass budgets and do these things, and this money is going to go to this, but there's really no strings attached saying that it has to. Well, we're giving our money, to these organizations, and they get to determine what's going to happen with it.
So help me with a philosophical issue with regard to
Okay, I'll try.
pre-kindergarten,
Yeah.
because I get it. Okay, there's this national group, and they're working with a state group, and there's some leftism that they're promoting, and we've documented it's there.
Yeah.
The Idaho Association for the Education of Young Children and the national organization that they work with, no question, very left of center. Let's say that wasn't there.
Mhm.
What would the objection would you have an objection to pre-kindergarten? So this grant comes to Idaho, local school district has it, no middleman.
I am not sold on the pre-kindergarten, or even the, pre-kindergarten, or even kindergarten. I mean, okay, it's great to be able to have your kids socialize and learn those things, but kids, if you psychologically, if you look at their development, and many other countries around us, they don't start education until kids are 7 or 8 years old, because they're not ready for that type of education. I mean, and if they can be with their parents and be with their families, that's the best education they can get for young children. We have no data showing that early education actually makes kids smarter in the long run. And so, I've put my kids in preschool. They went for a couple days a week for a couple of hours, and it was solely just to socialize them, to
Right.
get them used to playing with other kids. I was not expecting them to have a formal education at that point in time, or anything else. And I had the opportunity to stay at home with my kids, which, that was a choice that we made. And it was an important one. But I haven't been sold on it. I haven't seen anything showing me that it actually benefits kids in the long run. And I think a lot of people like it because it is free
Free
babysitting for
babysitting.
them, unfortunately. And so, of course, you have the businesses and the companies that are for it, because their workers are gonna get free childcare. Basically, they don't have to pay for it. But if we're really putting the child's best interest into play, then I really don't see where that benefits them.
You don't have to deal if you're a business, pre-kindergarten avails you the ability to not have to worry about an employee who calls you up and
Right.
says, "I've got to go deal with, Timmy's got a
Right.
whatever
Yeah,
today."
exactly. Exactly. And that's unfortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate, I think, to put people in that situation to begin with. I didn't have my kids so that someone else could raise them. And I understand that everybody has different situations, but I think as a whole, I mean, if people want to stick their kids into kindergarten or daycare or whatever it is, that's up to them. But it should be on their dime. It shouldn't be the taxpayers that are paying for it.
Yet the Republican legislature is at some point headed in that direction. The full day kindergarten, pre-kindergarten is
Yeah.
just around the corner.
Oh, the push has been going on for the last several years.
Yeah, it's funny too. I remember when I worked for the State Department of Agriculture. I did that too, but I also worked for the Department of Education for a brief amount of time, and one of my jobs was to research the origins of kindergarten and pre-kindergarten. And 1970s, when Idaho added kindergarten, the promise was that kindergarten was going to help get kids ready for first grade.
Right.
Now they want pre-kindergarten to get kids ready for kindergarten.
Right.
And where does that stop?
Yeah. And again, kids in their brain development are not ready for a formal education at that point. And that's why, again, we have countries all around us, like Sweden and different places, they don't start formal education until kids are older.
Where's that conversation about, okay, if we expand kindergarten, somebody loses in this equation. Government grows, something is shrinking.
Hmm. Hmm.
Obviously, we know what that is. It's families, it's
Right.
churches, it's community organizations, private schools,
Yeah.
other things in the community. Is there anyone in the legislature who kind of goes, okay, let's pause a little bit and recognize that when government wins, something else is losing. When government grows, something is shrinking.
There's a few, especially on the education committee, that will definitely be asking those questions. I wish I was on the education committee so I could ask those questions. There's a few, but I think again, the mentality, there's this disconnect, and the mentality is that, oh, this is all just great. This is all just good stuff, and it's because a lot of the time we're sold all the good part, right? We're told all the good part. We're never told about, that there's this other side to it, and you have in these committees, you have people from these different organizations or these different agencies that will come and testify before the committees, and they'll tell you all the good stuff about how wonderful this is going to be, how amazing this is going to be, how much good this is going to do. And a lot of just regular people don't have the ability or the time or anything to be able to come in and testify on the flip side, or you're not told any of the flip side. It's all the positive. And yeah, you can sell anything. I mean, I can sell a used lemon car, and tell you all the positives about it. But when you get it home, you're going to find out that it's a used lemon car and you're not going to want to keep it. So we're told all the good stuff all the time, but there's this disconnect. And I think I was saying how today, I think it would be so interesting at the beginning of the session if all legislators were given X amount of dollars, and every time they passed a spending bill or they passed a budget or something, that, you have 10 legislators and they each have to pony up, like $2 million or whatever the budget is, divided amongst the legislators, and whoever voted for it, that's what they have to pay. And then to see how much money they have left at the end of the session, just, play money. But if they run out of money during the session, they have to figure out a way to either borrow it or IOU it or go to jail or whatever the case
That's
may
fascinating.
be.
That's really
I think it would
fascinating.
just be kind of a fun thing to try, but to see how much money is left at the end. Because, when you're not physically having to pay that money or write that check, there's a disconnect that happens,
The
unfortunately.
governor is contemplating a 17% increase in spending year over year.
Yeah,
Bigger than the media has portrayed it to be, but
right.
is there, hey, whoa, that's a lot.
You would think, right? But again, we weren't told it was 17%. We were told it was a much smaller amount. They make it sound like it's going to be just great. A lot of it's, go along to get along. But who's really looking out for the taxpayers? It comes back to that. Who's really looking out for the taxpayers, and what do they get to keep? I mean, states all around us, their tax rates continue to increase. Our tax rates continue to increase. People are going home with less and less in their wallets from their paychecks. Where does it end? When do we say enough taxing? And again, we have tons of taxes that we pay for. We're paying taxes left and right. Eventually I'm sure we'll be taxed to breathe or whatever the case might be.
Well, that sounds like a fair tax that applies
Wouldn't
to
that be?
everybody.
Yeah, it would go for everybody, and we could tax it.
So,
Absolutely.
I almost hesitate to even jokingly talk about this stuff because invariably somebody's going to say, wow,
That's a great
that's a
idea.
great
Huh?
idea.
Yeah,
A breathing tax. Okay. We'll just,
exactly.
those darn Californians, they come to Idaho and they breathe Idaho's air and
They're using up our oxygen.
They don't pay taxes on it. So maybe if we do like a 20% breath tax and then we only rebate that back through the income tax, so the Californians continue to be taxed.
Right. I mean, it's completely plausible.
It's completely plausible.
Nothing surprises me anymore. So that would be one that, someone could bring it forward and I wouldn't be surprised, actually. So we're to that point where anything can go.
So switching gears completely, last legislative session and the special legislative session, or the
Extended.
the sequel, or whatever it was, there were some efforts to, again, deal with these issues that have been plaguing us for years. You were involved in that, coming up with some
Yeah.
ideas to protect medical privacy and protect people who face a COVID requirement. Where's that now? Is that I haven't seen anything so far this session. It's so early yet. Well, it's February, but
Right.
can we expect that the legislature is going to tackle that?
Yeah,
issue?
that whole thing is really unfortunate because, over the last couple of years with COVID and all that, I mean, all of us have been hearing from constituents on, mandates, and they're losing their jobs, or, they're having to choose between, working or quitting, or they're being laid off, without pay, or whatever the case may be. And we've been hearing about this over and over and over again. It hasn't gone away. Our governor's continued to issue emergency orders every month for the last couple of years. We're still in emergency. We have the federal government that's continuing to push mandates and coming up with all these crazy ideas on what they think is going to help. And so we're not done with this issue yet. We still have this issue. It hasn't gone away. And so during those 3 days in November that we were here, there were several of us that had worked on bills over the last few months that we brought forward. And unfortunately, there was nine pretty decent ones, and they were all sent to health and welfare during that time when they were not going to be meeting. So they basically got sent to health and welfare just to die. We are resurrecting several of those. There's actually a group of us that have started meeting together to get some of these details worked out and really try to hone in on each of the issues that we are seeing occur in regards to COVID shots or the mandates. And so there should probably be some stuff out probably next week. I mean, I did resubmit my bill that I ran last time too as a personal bill because again, I couldn't get the chairman of Health and Welfare to allow my bill to come forward in his committee. So I personal billed that one, but I have other bills that I have worked on, and there's other legislators that are working on bills to try to handle a lot of those issues. So
You have a problem in the Health and Welfare Chairman in the House, but you also have a problem with the Senate at large.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
What are the odds of you getting through those hurdles?
So I've heard that the chairman on the Senate side, if it's anything COVID related, he's not hearing any of it. I kind of assume that that's probably on both sides, the House and the Senate, that if it's COVID related, they're just not going to hear it. And it's just so unfortunate. I mean, we have people that are in really bad situations. I mean, we have people that are getting kicked off of transplant lists now because they don't have a COVID shot, and even though their doctor advised them not to get one. And so and we have people that have had terrible side effects to taking the shot because they were coerced or forced or whatever the case may be, where they had to get it. And they saw that as their only option. And then they end up with these side effects. And who's responsible for that? No, there's nobody responsible for that. It doesn't fit into any of the normal categories. Good luck getting the government to give you anything if you get injured because of this shot. So there's so many issues that are involved in it. And to me, a lot of it's really nefarious. It's really unfortunate to put people in that situation. And so the state does need to take the initiative and take those steps to protect the people of Idaho.
When you say nefarious, what do you mean?
I just see where a lot of the stuff that's going on, where the media, for one, has taken a lot. I mean, if you come out against the shot for whatever, if you're someone that has had a reaction to this shot, you're silenced off of social media, you're silenced, in the media in general. It's like there's and the ads that Idaho runs, I don't know if you've heard the ads, but there's nothing negative about, oh, go get the shot. I mean, most ads you hear in regards to any type of drugs or pharmaceutical products, there's always that disclosure at the end, that they read really, really fast and tell you all the different side effects.
May cause bleeding, may cause your heart to stop beating.
Right.
May cause you to faint spontaneously.
All those fun things. Yeah. There's none of that. There's none of that anywhere. And people that are being injured, there's people that have died from taking it. I'm sorry, there is, but they're all being silenced. And any doctors that come out against it, for whatever the case may be, they're being labeled, they're being silenced. I'm called an anti-vaxxer a lot of the time. I'm not anti-vaccination. I don't agree that this is a vaccination, because to me, a vaccine is actually supposed to stop something. And we now know that doesn't happen with this.
Get the shot and then 4 boosters.
Right.
And then it's supposed to minimize the
then you may not end up in the hospital. Right.
Can you imagine if the flu was like that?
No, or any other shot. Yeah.
Polio.
Yeah.
Right. Polio. We give you your polio. Now there's still a good chance you'll get polio.
Right.
But
and you only need 3 more shots.
After the 5th booster, you might, maybe minimize the effects a little bit. It'll be somewhat paralyzed, but not all the way.
Yeah. So all these different things that we're seeing happening, to me, it's not honest. It's not truthful. And to me, it's nefarious. and to take people that have had reactions and to try to tell them that they're crazy, or that, it's not from that, not even making the connection. I just feel that that's really just nefarious.
When the whole COVID mandate thing started popping and some people came forward and they said, you know what we need to do? We just need to expand the existing exemptions under Idaho laws. There are exemptions right now, religious exemptions and so on, that you could apply in certain situations. That's actually got me really concerned
Hmm.
because now here's the list of the objectors. We now
Right,
know who they are and they're in a database
right,
somewhere.
right.
Do you share that, or is that just me being
No, it,
paranoid?
it does concern me. For one, Idaho does not have, so we have children exemptions. We really don't have adult
Right.
exemptions in the state. And so, yeah. And we're finding out that the government has all these different lists of people with of different things, and we found out recently that adult immunizations, that people were being put into data systems in the
Right.
state for that. So yeah, so that is a concern, because I feel that that can be utilized against people down the road in some way, shape, or form.
So what do you see the solution being then?
As far as the state goes,
Yes.
well, I think we need to stand up for people's rights to begin with. That it should be a don't ask, don't tell mentality, I guess, if you want to put it that way. That people's health status, their vaccine status, should not be used against them in any way, shape, or form. And that we treat it as we would have anything else. I mean, when have we done this with anything else in the past? We haven't. We have not ever taken these measures or implemented those things that we're seeing done now. I mean, when we start telling people they have to show papers, or they can't travel, or anything along those lines, it just brings me back to the 1930s Germany, and what transpired there. And I really feel that people should not be held, and if they're forced into something, I mean, and I guess that's the other thing. I'll back up just a little bit. If we are putting all these things into play, to me, we're legitimizing these mandates. And I don't want to do that either. I don't want to legitimize something that should not be legitimized. And so we have to be very careful on how we implement laws or bring bills forward in regards to this issue, because I don't want to give the mandates the control over the individual, and say, oh yeah, we're going to accept that. Now we're going to say that the mandates do exist, and that we have to accept them by putting laws into place. So I don't want to legitimize that.
There's now the mandate that the Biden administration was successful in keeping in place, which is the one that deals with Medicare and Medicaid.
Hmm.
Does that raise the level of concern? There's hardly any conversation taking place about the biggest program in all the state government, which is Medicaid.
Yeah.
But is anyone now saying, well, maybe this relationship we have with the federal government isn't so great because just by virtue of participating in the program,
Yeah. We're bound by
you're
what they
bound by
say.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
today it's it's the COVID vaccine. God knows what it'll be tomorrow.
Exactly. No, I think, if states are supposed to have sovereignty, and if we don't start pulling back from the federal government now, we're going to continue to be more and more controlled by the federal government and lose our sovereignty that we still have left. We as a state need to stop relying so heavily on the federal government. I remember when the ARPA money was coming into play, and they sent us these booklets on what we're going to be obligated, and there were so many blank spaces in
Didn't
that.
even know the answers.
No, they didn't even know the answers, and yet we're agreeing to whatever it is they may come up with. It reminded me of Common Core, going back to that, where we accepted Common Core and we agreed to whatever strings were attached to that, and we didn't even know what all the strings were, because they were still building the system. And so we continue to do this. We repeat this history, unfortunately, and we are becoming more beholden to the federal government. We are losing our sovereignty. We are agreeing to who knows what. I mean, we may not even know all the agreements that we're actually agreeing to for several years still, and yet we're tying ourselves to that.
And yet, If I'm just a average Joe Idahoan who reads the local newspaper and
Yeah.
believes what's in it, I read these stories about how Brad Little and House Speaker Bedke and Pro Tem Winder are working overtime to, fight the Biden administration. Every news
Mm.
release, that talks about, the Biden administration this, Biden administration that. Is that a true portrayal of what's really going on?
I don't see it because there have been many missed opportunities that we could have taken. We were looking at one today in regards to the National School Board Association again, and you had many. I think there was 14 different states. Their attorney general signed onto a paper to the National School Board Association, telling them how wrong they were on this. That we needed to remove memberships and all that sort of stuff.
We weren't one of them.
RAG was not one of them, unfortunately. And so there's been a lot of opportunities that have occurred that we could have participated in or even led the way on, and we have not done that. So I don't see that happening. I mean, there's some little messagings here and there about how we're fighting the Biden administration and we're doing, X, Y, and Z. But to me, they're just talking points. There's really not a lot of action behind those,
So
unfortunately.
is it just political theater? Is it designed to trick people into thinking that they're
Yeah.
fighting the good fight and something else is taking place behind the scenes meanwhile?
I heard a statistic that the major 85% of people really only know what's going on the federal level, and they just get tidbits here and there because of whatever they watch or read or whatever the case may be. But few people actually know what's happening in their own state. And just to give you an instance on that, I have people that will contact me at the beginning of the session and they want to know, what am I doing in DC? How is
Right.
DC? And I don't even go to DC, but that's where they think I go. And unfortunately, it's because there's been this disconnect between the people and their government over the last many, many years. And people are usually, they're busy, they're working, they're taking care of their families, they're doing all that sort of stuff. So they don't give a lot of time to what's happening in their own backyards. And so they'll get these tidbits on what's happening at the federal level. So it's really easy for people to be able to utilize those tidbits and message it in a way that, oh, look at what we're doing. We sent this paper. We're fighting, the Biden administration. We're telling him no on this. But there's really little action that actually comes into play with that. And it really does little for our state. It's not helping us maintain our sovereignty, really. It's not helping us in a lot of ways that we could really be utilizing and making positive.
Historically, states have taken initiative. My favorite story is the state of Wisconsin and the enactment of the Fugitive Slave Act at the federal level. The law being that if you probably remember this story, you find a fugitive slave, this is 1858, I think.
Mhm.
You have a fugitive slave from the South, you are duty bound, every man, woman, and child, duty bound to return
Yeah.
the slave to their Southern master.
Yeah.
And the state of Wisconsin said, not going to do that.
Right.
And even in Idaho history, there's been some of that pluck, dealing with nuclear waste issues,
Mhm.
federal nuclear waste coming into Idaho, and being left here on top of our aquifer. Is When do we get to that? Is there the possibility that this legislature says, you know what, um, we're an equal partner, for example, on Medicaid.
Yeah.
We're partners. It's a state federal program. It's not just the federal government.
Dictating.
We're not gonna abide by that,
Yeah.
and we're gonna protect people who work in the healthcare system against the federal mandate,
Yeah.
despite what the Supreme Court said about it. Is that
And we could do that. We could easily do that. I mean, we have states all over that, have thumbed their noses at immigration
immigration,
issues or,
marijuana?
yeah, drugs or, what I mean, we have Oregon right next to us that legalized everything,
Right.
and so are the feds going in and saying, oh, naughty, naughty, you
They
shouldn't have done
literally
that?
brought a tank to Ontario and shut down the dispensaries over there because of the illegality of the marijuana. Of course, they didn't do that.
Yeah, no, not at all. And so, there's been, again, missed opportunities, I think, where Idaho could have taken the lead, could have taken the initiative, being this conservative state that we are, where we could have done that. And we could still do that. We could say, look, we're not, that might have been your idea with this, but we're going to do this and go ahead and try to stop us. But that has to do with your leadership. And if your state is only as strong, I say your state's only as strong as what your leadership is, and your leadership's only as strong as the people are. So if you don't have the strength of leadership in there, they're not going to take those initiatives. They're not going to stand up against the federal government, and they're going to allow the federal government to dictate and tell you what to do. And that worries me because we have issues. We're a strong Second Amendment state. If the feds decide one day that all of a sudden, certain guns can't be owned anymore, I mean, what's Idaho going to do? Are we going to go along with that? Or
In order for you to participate in Medicare and Medicaid,
right,
you have to disclose all the guns you
all the guns that you
own,
own,
and you have
yeah,
to surrender half of them, or
right,
certain kinds,
yeah,
or
it could be
whatever.
anything crazy along those lines,
Is
anything.
there the wherewithal, the fortitude to do that right now?
I could see it happening. I honestly could see it happening. I could see a lot of different scenarios playing out, unfortunately. But again, I do see people waking up to what's transpiring too. And that does give me hope, because it is going to take the people. And like we were saying, there's been this disconnect between the people and their government. And it's supposed to be a government by and for the people. That's how it was put together. But if the people don't participate in it, then it just runs amok, unfortunately.
I need to go back because just to clarify, the fortitude had to do mostly with your leadership.
Absolutely.
Will will
Absolutely.
will they will they be the ones to say, "Nope, we're standing in the abyss,
Well,
and you've gone
and
too far"?
and you can kind of tell on that where you look at the financials, the people, who are they getting their money from? What are they getting out of this? What are they benefiting from? That's questions that you always need to be asking. You look at, who's donating to their campaigns. There's some legislators that they're getting a lot of money from the pharmaceutical companies and the hospitals, and so of course, there's going to be some asking on, hey, we want you to help us with this, or don't vote against this, and that's politics, unfortunately. And so yeah, so you got to always ask who are they benefiting from, what are they getting out of it, and those are two really good questions to ask every single time.
So, I don't like to talk too much about politics, but I will because rumor has it that you're looking to run for the state senate.
Mhm.
True story.
True story.
So why would you wanna be in the Senate when we've made all this progress getting the House to be noticeably different?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's almost as if their legislatures operate, or chambers operating in 2 different states.
Yeah.
The House is here, I guess, and the Senate is, like, in Illinois. Why would you wanna do that?
I know, I love being in the house, but I've been here 4 years, and what I am seeing happening is that regardless of the good legislation that we actually do produce out of the house, the Senate is a roadblock for us every single time. We even my own senator, they couldn't even override a veto this last time to help Idahoans and help us in the emergency orders and all that sort of stuff. And so I just really feel that in order to make changes over there, we have to get new people and good people that are going to run for Senate and get them in there. The Senate is much smaller than the House, but we need good people over there too. And it's not that a lot of us that are transitioning in that regard. We're not just going to leave our seats open to whomever. There's a lot of people that are looking to run for office on different levels.
So you think that we're not gonna be switching problems? Okay, now the Senate's much better and the House is
I'm
a
really
real
hoping
disaster.
not. I'm really, really hoping not. I can't control everything, unfortunately, but that is what I do know is that we do need to make changes over there. We've seen it over and over again where we just have these problems. In fact, one of the jokes in the House is, the Senate's where good bills go to die, and we have to make that Senate stronger. It's in a good way, in a positive way, and we got to get them more conservative.
I may not know how this works, but couldn't you just identify as a senator?
You know what? I've thought of that. In fact, I have people that already call me that.
Oh,
So
okay.
so maybe I could. Maybe
Yeah,
I could just start identifying as
there
a
you go. And
senator.
I'm just a senator. I identify as this. I'm trans Senate,
Yeah.
whatever. Well, good. What other closing thoughts or comments you have?
Yeah, I one of my big things, since even before I ran for office, is just to get people involved and how important it is for people to be involved and aware of what's going on. People will tell me, "Oh, I hate politics. It's terrible. It's awful," which there's truth to that. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly all mixed together. But government and politics and everything are involved in every aspect of your life, every single aspect. There's
You
really
can't
not one that they're not
you
involved
can't
in.
say, "Oh, it doesn't affect me," or "It's
Right.
just not important to me."
Exactly.
Whatever your profession is,
Whatever you
whatever
do,
you
wherever you
do,
live, it does
it's all
not matter.
political.
It's
Yep.
all political. It's all government.
Isn't that interesting though that people say, "Gosh, this COVID thing shouldn't be about politics,"
Oh,
but it all is.
yeah.
Healthcare, education, finance, taxes,
Yes. You
all of
can
it's
take
politics.
any scenario, any issue, and it will have politics and government involved in it. Anyone that you want.
I try to tell people, make it a habit, just every day. You get up in the morning, and this legislature's only in session from January until about the end of March, beginning of
Yeah,
April, usually.
usually.
But just make it a habit. So you get up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you take a shower. I don't know necessarily in that order, but
Right.
maybe have some cereal, and then you make sure to call one of your three legislators.
Yeah, absolutely. Contact your legislators, email them, get to know who they are. We just had the redistricting, so that's going to change things up just a little bit. But right now, do that. If you can come down to the Capitol, come down there.
I should really touch on redistricting.
Okay.
Wasn't that just the slimiest decision? That wasn't really based in any kind of law. What's going on?
Oh my goodness. The rendering that came from our courts was very, very interesting to me. It kind of reminded me of the grocery tax lawsuit that happened, right?
Yeah.
Where, okay, you shouldn't have done that. We're going to slap your wrist. Just don't do it again. And this one was almost as if they want to make rules or make the law to fit what transpired. And the rendering that came out with that was really, really interesting.
Nonetheless, the fact that it's been done, there's nothing we can do about it, only amplifies the point. You got to be engaged. You got
Me
to
too.
know who the candidates are. You got to ask them tough questions.
Ask questions, look at their history.
Don't just ask about. And you're pro-life, you're pro-Second Amendment, fantastic, but really dig down and ask. What is the proper role of government? What do you think about the fact that we keep adding on to the education system? What do you think about critical race theory being
Right.
taught in Idaho's public schools
Right.
and the colleges?
Well, and you really have to look at what the actions are, because I tell people, politicians are like used car salesmen. They will tell you everything you want to hear, and they'll make it sound great, and they'll sprinkle it with confetti and all sorts of fun stuff, and really sell you that they are the best candidate, they are the most conservative, they are the most this and that. But you got to look at their actions. You got to look at what they've actually done. Look at their voting record. There's lots of different organizations now that are grading legislators on how they vote and how they are fiscally as well as in policy. Ask them the tough questions, find out where they stand. Don't just ask them the little, softball questions like, are you pro-life? Are you pro-Second Amendment? They'll all tell you that. They'll all tell you that they are.
I was at a legislative town hall meeting in Coeur d'Alene last year, 400 people in the room. They spent the first hour of a 2-hour meeting just talking about abortion. And of course, everybody there, what's your opinion on abortion? Well, it's terrible. We should have easy. It's
Easy.
super
Too easy.
Dig really down. What's the proper role of government?
Ask them if they're for dual federalism or cooperative federalism.
Exactly. Ask them if they believe that states have the ability to kick out dumb federal policies. Ask them if they support the continued growth of the welfare state.
Yep.
And the government encroaching in every aspect of our lives. And people just don't get asked those questions.
They don't. They don't.
They really are concentrating what's going on in Washington, D.C.
And it's great. It's great to know what's happening in D.C., but we have little control over what happens
People know
there.
more about Lindsey Graham than they do their own state senator or representative. That's the problem.
We got to change that. That's the mentality that does need to change. And that is teaching people how to get engaged and how to be part of that process, because the people have to be part of the governmental process. It's the only way it works correctly.
Well, Tammy, I, for one, and I speak for a lot of people when I say you're doing great work, and we really appreciate you. And thank you for coming on the program tonight.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
And we'll be back again on Thursday. Actually, Wednesday, it's the Steph Lucas show. We'll be going back over what happened in the legislature the last few days. And then on Thursday, come back for another Hoff time report because we're going to have the chairman of the Senate Education Committee, a young guy by the name of Stephen Thane, on the program. So you won't want to miss that.
Oh.
Thanks again for watching, and we'll talk to you again next time.